Welcome to your Daily Dose of Theological German. We're on installment number 6 of this Lutheran work concerning the freedom of a Christian. And we're getting these excerpts from Ziefle's Graded Reader. In case you're just joining us in this series, you can go check out the introduction. I highly recommend it. It's a great resource for practicing reading your German. But let's get started. Thus proves the commandment. Okay, that's a weird sounding thing. Let's try to stay on top of our syntax here. So recall that in German, your main verb is always going to be in second position if it's in a main clause, and this is the main clause. So second position, and so you have it here, proves or demonstrates. It's conjugated in the third person singular present tense, and so that's fine. But because the sentence begins with this so, which is an adverb functioning here as kind of a discourse marker, then your subject, which would have otherwise come before the verb, actually has to come after, and so the commandment is the subject. So the commandment proves thusly, or so, but then it's expanded to include what the commandment actually is. So this is all technically part of your subject as well, but now you have another clause embedded within the subject. So this says, you shall not have evil thoughts. And of course, I have to kind of jump around there a bit because if you're paying attention here, you have a modal construction, which means that your conjugated verb is going to be the modal auxiliary. So it shows up in second position here. It matches your second person subject and conjugation. And then what happens is the complement to that auxiliary is down here, haben, and that's going to be in the infinitive form, showing up at the end of the clause because this is a main clause. If this had been a subordinate clause, then your conjugated verb actually shows up at the end, and then haben would have been just before it. So you'll have to pay attention to those patterns that are obviously very common in German, but I just like to always review them. Okay, so the commandment, you shall not have evil desires, thus proves or demonstrates. What does it prove? That we, all of us, are sinners, and no person is able to be without evil desires. He does what he wants. Now, you might be looking at this verb here and saying, you know, that should be a third present, and if that's the case, you're probably expecting to see it conjugated this way. Tut, he does. The reason why you have the conjugation that you see here is because this is actually a subjunctive. It also could be an imperative, but obviously you've got a third person subject there, so it's got to be the subjunctive. And the subjunctive is used in cases where it's supposed to be less, I guess, actualized in some sense. And so sometimes you might want to nuance your translation and say he might do, or he may do, or he may very well do, or something like that. But I don't think that's the case here. You kind of have to watch the context. I think because Luther is sort of speaking hypothetically, right? No person is able to do to be without evil desires. And so he's not talking about a concrete situation, and I think that's why you would see a subjunctive here in this context. And so in English, you're not really going to translate it any differently. You're just going to say he does what he wants. But that's what's going on with that morphology. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you found that helpful. We'll see you tomorrow.